And last but not least, this is a room that we intentionally keep cold. We try to keep it quite cold, not freezing though. And we have a lot of onions, we have a lot of beans, and a lot of dried fruits, and we keep a lot of fruit in here. And right there is 2 big bags of storage onions that we keep in this cold room. We keep the vast majority of our onions in this cold room, and we try to keep this room very cold. So we have we have onions that are storage onions, and then we have regular onions. We even keep potatoes up here. Not all of the potatoes, mind you, that we own, but we do keep a good supply up here, in addition to what is down in the root cellar. And then we also have, these are storage onions over here in those 2 little boxes. And then over here are more everyday onions, the Elsa Craig onions. And we have a batch of garlic in with them. And this is the room where I keep my musical instrument. So we have a lot of food in this room. And this morning it was about 25 degrees outside, but we keep that window right there open. And at night we run that fan. Well, good morning everybody. I just wanted to do a quick tour of how we store a lot of our food in the house. Not just downstairs in the root cellar, but also in various parts of the house. And this is a particularly busy time of year as far as food storage goes, because just coming off the gardening season, we have so much food that needs to be stored. And to me, that's the name of the game for gardening, which is you grow food so that it'll take you through the winter. So we're taking food and we're putting it here and we're putting it there and over on those shelves and underneath this table. We have food everywhere in the house, and I tried to show you a little bit of that in these in some of those earlier scenes of the squashes, etc. So the root cellar video was very popular, and it got me thinking. 1 or 2 of the commenters got me thinking that we should talk more about not just the root cellar. If you don't have a root cellar, that doesn't mean that you're done or that you can't store food. One of our friends in the commenter section said that she has a room in her house that she keeps cold for that very reason. And I'm actually sitting in our cold room, which also happens to be our bedroom. And we run the fan at night. We had the fan on last night. It means you have to have an extra blanket on, but we try to keep this room very cool, if not cold. There have been times in the wintertime when we actually had a little bit of ice in the water of our water glass next to the bed. And so that's maybe a little bit extreme, but we try to keep the room very cold. And we love sleeping in a cold room. But anyway, in this particular cold room, I've got all of our onions, the Elsa Craig onions. These are those wonderful Elsa Craig onions that I showed you when we were growing them last summer. They're holding up so well. It was not only our best year growing onions, but it's our best year storing onions, because not just because of the cold room. I used a little bit different technique in curing the onions ahead of time, and I did a couple of videos on that if you want to look back to the summer, and I'll be doing it again next year. But we keep potatoes in this room, we keep garlic in this room, and so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that just like most of you probably have a pantry Or you keep, if you do any canning or any fermenting, you might have your quart jars up on the shelf lined up, and we do too. Most people have that, but that's one type of food storage, is canning and fermenting. Another method for food storage is your freezer. Now, if you have a refrigerator, and I'm sure most of you do, you probably have a freezer section on the top or in the bottom, and make use of that. Right now we have a lot of bananas in our freezer, in one of our freezer sections. We have 2 refrigerators and 1 chest freezer. We buy half a pig twice a year, and we have it custom butchered to the way that we want our cuts made, and that, of course, obviously all goes into the freezer. And we also buy broiler chickens from a neighbor who grows them just for this purpose. And so we buy 10 of those a year, and we should probably buy more than that, but 10 seems to work out well for us. And we keep ground beef, ground pork, bacon, lard, and so forth in the freezer. And even your refrigerator makes for a good storage area. And also in this cold room, we have various rices and beans, dry beans if you will. And we keep flour in this room. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you don't have a root cellar under your house, don't think that you're cooked or that you're done or that you can't store food. You know, like we have done here, and like my other friend who has done in her house, designate a room that you might keep closed off from the rest of the house, from the rest of the heat that the house produces, and try to keep that room cold, just as cold as you can. Try not to, if you can somehow turn the heat off in that room, or if you can keep the door closed so that it doesn't receive room heat from the rest of the house. That's what I recommend. And you'd be surprised how much you can actually keep in that cold room. I'm probably going to buy a 50-pound bag of potatoes because one of our potato varieties that we depend on did not have a good crop this year. So I'm going to keep those potatoes in our cold room, and it'll be an experiment to see how well they store compared to the potatoes that I put in our root cellar. So that's going to be interesting. I mostly put root vegetables in the root cellar, and that's probably why they call it a root cellar. I just thought of that. Anyway, that's pretty much the end of this video because it's just a short one today. I got to thinking that, you know, just because a lot of the commenters don't have root cellars, that doesn't mean that they should fret. Another thing that came to mind, one of the comments that we had was talking about how my dad must have really been thinking ahead about putting that root cellar in place. But I'm not so sure that he intended for it to be a root cellar, because I don't see any signs down there of food being stored other than what we've put down there. When I first came here to Maine, my dad had one of those garbage cans that are perforated with holes. He had that in the pantry, and he had his potatoes in it, but they were in sand, in damp sand. And so after I arrived a long time ago, 22 years ago, and started looking around and getting ready to make some changes, I noticed I pulled the lid off of this can, and in it stunk, and there were a bunch of potatoes in sand, and they just did not fare well at all. And even at that point in time, I knew better than storing potatoes in damp sand. But that's what he did, and so he was trying to store. We would probably consider him a homesteader, even though he probably never heard that term. back then. But he was trying to grow food, and he planted fruit trees, and he was attempting to store food. One thing that he did do really well was he either grew carrots or he purchased carrots, a big gross of carrots, and he chopped them up and he canned them. And so when I got here, on the shelf where it must have been 50 to 70 quart jars of sliced carrots, which worked well for me because one of the things I like to make is a beef stew, and it takes a bunch of carrots. So he did that, and he also had canned green beans. And he also had a couple of big freezers, and he kept various kinds of food. He would cook cauliflower and put that in the freezer. And so he did a lot of storing in his own right. It's just that he didn't use the root cellar to store food. So that's kind of interesting. So I don't think, when he dug that root cellar, I think he meant it just to be a cellar. And it's because it has a dirt floor because he just never finished it. A lot of work has to go into putting it in a full basement. And he just never finished it. He just had other things to do. So that's about it for today. And I thank you all again for watching. And I hope that this video will encourage and inspire some of you to think that, okay, I don't have a root cellar, but maybe I can still bring some of my vegetables in and even grow vegetables for winter storage. But just because I don't have a root cellar doesn't mean that I can't store some of these vegetables, because I think you really can, and it's worth trying. So I guess that's it for today. I'm going to get outside and work with some flax, break some flax today. So, all right, thanks a lot, and I'll catch you on the next one. Okay, bye.